Because the earth as we know it will end, I plant dahlias. And because dahlias will fade, in late fall I dig up their roots to make a potion that dyes my scarf of white silk the color of the earth. And because the scarf will wear out and will shred, I untie it from around my neck, off it flies into the wind with the prayer flags. And because my neck will someday not be needed to hold up my head, I take down a recipe for stock, good bone broth. And because my head takes stock of each leaf as it settles onto the dark, shining surface of the pond, I reach for an invisible spool of red cord, knot the cord, and begin mending the net we've torn, this net made of air and ocean, made of sun and soil. At junctures woven into this net are jewels whose each facet reflects star groves and owls, minnows and eelgrass, meadowlarks, milkweed, and monarchs, so that each apparently single thing exists in the light of everything else. And because the net also trembles as it senses the glacial erratic in any heart that just sits there and sits there and sits there, a mute lament. And because each of us has the power to turn harm into healing, and because the earth as we know it will end, I plant dahlias.
They do it overnight, the Catawba tendrils. Reach and wrap the wire above them. Grow and curl, extend and expand. They reach blindly because how else could they reach? And find what they didn't know was there, what's been arranged for them, the perfect structure for their needs, or as perfect as this man could make it. What happens in darkness in a single evening? Let's not call it passion, not compare it to human bodies, which also can reach unseeing for each other. Let's not think how conducive the fixation. If I decide a tendril's not landed right, I can undo it carefully, maybe half the time. The other times result in damage. Let's not call it passion, not compare it to how men can hold each other in the dark, can coil each other's bodies in a green fastness, the interlocking of a desire more fierce than simple need. We know need. We pass its debased currency daily. We know what blandness its worship comes to. But do we know this? Overnight, the instinctive triple coil of a thin tendril, such fierce binding. Let's not call it passion, not be implicated in its dumb green living, not take it as just another reminder from the natural world of too much mind, how often it fails us.
Oh, oh, was all I could say. My breath stopped as caravans of cars to the north and south stopped. Headlights on in the gray gloaming, while a moose gangled back and forth like a crossing guard. Head up as if to say to the cars, stand back, let him cross. The small calf, wobbling on the far side of the road, advanced and fell back, unsure its mother's repeated crossings promised safe passage. Finally, the moose, shaking her head, moved toward the nearest car as if to charge it. then returned to the calf, and once more cleared the way like a tackle blocking for the runner, which the calf now became, racing across the divide and into underbrush on the other side. The cars' blinking lights sounded like New Year's Eve.
I don't pick raspberries in late afternoon. Bees are mean, possessive. They detect my motion and heat. They hover eye to eye, then chase me away. Buzzing, zagging, they don't hear my plea. We don't want the same thing. You work the blossoms, I eat the fruit. They don't get this cause and effect. Dawn is best for picking raspberries when the thorns are softened by drops of dew. The berries, bright red and tight yesterday, have crimsoned overnight. They slip their buds now like oversized mittens. One September morning, I find a bee curled, frozen, or asleep atop a blossom. Is this one of the greedy bees that chased me? A workaholic caught by the cold while doubling its quota? Or is it an enlightened bee, locked out for the night for admiring the sunset? Grateful, in any case, for good taste in berries, I blow it warm breath. Its black fur quivers, its nimble legs poke, its wings stir, and from deep inside I hear a purr, an invitation to share the morning.
Pillaging the leaves that remain on the trees, the heavy wind ostracizes the landscape. At the same time, the landscape becomes flamboyant, neoteric, spectacular. And the wind chimes have not stopped all night. Dethroning fall, the wind takes everything but a few leaves adrift aimlessly on the pond.
At the edge of the meadow, I duck under the great, low, sweeping hemlock boughs. Enter night, hiding at noon, where a bloom of white resolves into you, the skull of a white-tailed buck. I pick you up, a little shocked at the parts we share, eye sockets, nasal cavity, incisors. You bear the skeleton of a veiny leaf, a coat of arms tattooed on top of your head. And I see now that you are not just one whole, but stitched together with fine, intricate lines, like cave drawings, once meaningful. I want to ask you how you lived, how you persisted as far as you could. Here, I want to tell you there are whole days I can barely stand up, never mind run or turn to leap, and I would gladly trade my skull, this hard case of clustered storms, for your sleek contour, your fiercely driven nights, your one broken antler with which I would thrash and knock through the seasons that remain.
Because you fly in all directions all at once, you should be honest about your ignorance of glass. You'll find no refuge at the edge of your panic. The light inside houses isn't the light of new or other moons. Shapes only seem inexplicable. Any fluttering you see isn't a trick, but it isn't the truth either. And what you see is never the last thing you'll ever see, except for that one time. The hawk and owl leave traces of themselves signs of the hunt. Understand they can't be everywhere, and they can't always be hungry for your sugary bones. Sometimes seeds and mealworms appear in the snow, signs of kindness or pity. Know that you are delighted in and listened to, but we are liars and hypocrites. Be wary of those who love you most.
Cutting through the thicket, I sculpt a path to the water. The river invents a distance larger than geography. In the chaos of current, a form emerges. I'm not frightened. There are worse things. I watch the reflection, pretend it is something else. She comes into focus, and I'm not sure if it's cloud cover or her hair. I know better than to name her. It can take a long time for something to emerge in a river, even after standing up to one's knees in water, poised for a sign. Long after I leave, the tributary will continue, mossing stones, cradling minnows, my makeshift path strangled by roots and skunk cabbage. The stream, exhausted by drought, holds traces of bounty. I place one black stone with a gleam of quartz on the bank, press my sneakers into the soft mud 12 times before reaching the road. I do not turn back.
Only when the first raspberries purpled and I probed the prickers to reach them did I see the pale orb. A mother spider, exhausted, invisible, had laid her egg sac in the elbow of stem and branch, wrapped threads around a leaf above to canopy her cradle. My first instinct was extinguish! 500 new spiders crawling into my home and laying their own egg sacs, the exponential was exorbitant. As I clipped the stem, translucent movement startled me. Babies the size of raspberry seeds were creeping through a pinhole and poking spinnerets into first air the way a toddler dabs at squash. I called my children. Pajamaed, barefoot, they awed at the sight. Then together we carried the newborn into the woods.
Our silver irises ring in the void. The rest of the garden's fine, the pines fine. Although we're still afraid an ICBM might drop out of the sky and land in the middle of our Siberians. Meanwhile, a chainsaw chokes somewhere and sleek dogs eat meat in a gulp. Wary of the beasts, we take shovels with us when we get the mail. And when we're tired from digging, we lean on them, wondering if our sanguinias will hemorrhage one day in a new hot zone, or if our blue flags will ever find hospices of shade before everything changes and gardens retreat from our ability to see them. No one will ever know we planted those irises. The first peonies was ours too, and the cherry tree and the tulip tree with inexact leaves like those drawn by children. We laid a carpet of myrtle, imagined the reach of lilacs, theorized what nature would be like if it lived in the vacuum it abhors. We make beds for the children of strangers, and for a drought that rises to its source and sinks to the molten core of the earth, making dust of irises and irises, bearded and beardless, of dust.
Prosperous, overcast, and rain so gentle you cannot feel it. Ostracism of the sun after yesterday's midsummer impersonation. Navigable enough that the tiny creatures here, the shrinking detriment of water has rendered the bank desert, the reed grass orphaned in the sun.
My father chuffs his shovel into soil with the sole of his right boot, more dried mud than leather, balances full weight, both feet on the shovel steps. Gloved hands rock the handle, the blade pries packed clay. He levers a clod, turns it, chops it, repeats to the right. The smell of earth takes him back to San Gabriel, the family farm of rented acreage, before the war, before Executive Order 9066. After tilling his first bed, he plants his shovel upright like a gnomon marking time, rests on the pine bench under the pin oak. After a long swig from a can of Coors, surveys his garden, never looks beyond his fence.
We always found our way back to the gaiety of it, satires of exigencies, flashes in the sun. But his river was never quite ours, was it? Or anyone else's. See Farmington from the riverbank? Not a chance. No ferrymen? Actually, there are two. One in Glastonbury, one in Chester. Plus, there's that knot in Windsor to consider. Down in Haddam, men don't imagine golden birds, but they often get to see eagles. Current tends to spill thickly there, sediment and dross. In spring, freshets are easily managed, compliant, familiar. Taken together, it's one big blue-brown cocktail. In winter, it begins as one thing and ends as another, carrying sticks and snow to the sound of sounds and the race of races, the sea of seas and the key of keys, where the poet of poets ignores icy innuendos and digs his feet deeper into the venereal sand.
And it was said that we should go to see this thing come to us from afar. So we set forth over fields simplified by snow and ice, bent low to negotiate an avenue of wild rose arched by weight of winter, its red hips ripe. Past a stand of cattails, umber seed tubes broken into beige wool, redolent as spice, and came to an endless lake, steel blue under a lowering anthracite sky ornamented by salmon trim at its distant edge. Along the shore, past bare willows, glowing from within, a serration of waves broke, all but frozen. From the rock-ridden jut of a long spit hung teeth of ice, a place as austere as the cold cattle shed and teeth-gnawed slats of a small corn crib we would hallow as a manger that night, nursery of God. Here now, at the heart of wilderness, was the mystery we'd come so far to see. At first nothing, a white-topped, white and gray striped boulder at the far end of the promontory. Then the white top of the boulder moved, swiveled like a lighthouse, illuminating a circle of the world, searching into us. The oval, gold-eyed face of a snowy owl, down from the Arctic tundra, a creature so fiercely itself, it was the proof I was looking for.
Because the squirrels mated last fall and built a higher, safer dray. Because the wind flayed bark from trees. Because it snowed and melted. Because returning robins nested snug and buds unfurled to blooms to fruit. Because the caterpillars hatched and ate and shat and wove cocoons. Because the youngest squirrels scampered and fledglings learned to unearth worms. Because the nectar drew the butterflies, then green gave way to red and yellow. Because the clouds spun counterclockwise, rent leaves from stems, from limbs, from trunks. Because the sun came out again, you, dear Finn, delirious, scent wild, cavort in crunching leaves that cup the complex tea of life and death with no idea tomorrow's steeping.
Beneath the earth, there is one route to get lost in. Beneath the earth, there is one route to be born in. You must see clearly these are not trees, they're women. Women in love, searching for a grove to mourn in. Their loneliness made deeper by the sparkling wind. Consume such tales as if you were being sworn in. Stand 80,000 years in one spot. Be patient. Imagine this is the place you were first born in. How intense the need to hold on to each other. Only fingers touch in this dark you're forlorn in. How wonderful to imagine a long embrace on the ground, in the grove, reeling the gaunt moon. I'll scramble these stories of aspens and people, use the round wind as a place for you to yearn in. Imagine that everyone out there is you. John, it's John, it's John. That's the dream you will turn in.
Now let us praise dung beetles, who roll balls of excrement towering over them. Faced with such an ordeal, Sisyphus might have called it quits, but these leggy, body-armored fellows sculpt, roll, and stash away fecal stuff 250 times their own weight nightly, for progeny born in the bosom of dung. See them clamber to the top of their globes and orient themselves by the stars, dead reckoning like ancient Polynesians at home in their wilderness of ocean.
Through the silence of first budding, the woodpecker announces its return, Just beyond my backyard, my wall of rocks, the hemlocks, pines, and oaks whose crowns were toppled long ago, that freak Halloween when feet of snow left us powerless. It's been a winter, more like spring. Already the pecker tastes the fall.
I do not even mind Owl now trending, scent flying through every interior design, every shelf of knickknacks, flapping and trapped in all the cul-de-sac curtains. But I must protest at last Owl as symbol of death. Yes, owl flight quieter than moonlight, quiet rent by rabbit screams, and yes, owl eyes and ears turning to the weakest light or squeak. Yet owl too with its cryptic plumage, a message to ferry you as far as dawn. Owl sustained with warm blood on its talons. I say, let owl swivel your head around to ask, who else conveys so much life?
Once there were women who read books in trees. I've heard it from their own lips, those stories, and I was one of them. I lay back in the wide branch of a dogwood tree, sun in the green leaves, a rain of petals on the grass beneath me. Once women washed in the watershed rainfall of streams that tumbled down mountains and into the plains below. I knew a woman who dug herself a well, another who raised rabbits and killed them clean, skinned them as I might slip off the winter coat I no longer need. Once there were women who worked fields in the hot sun, and afterwards, their work done, roamed the edges where field met forest, where at sundown the deer roused after dozing for hours in the chicory and Queen Anne's lace. I know one woman who spoke her poems aloud, standing at the edge of a field of tall grasses so that the rabbits and the mice and the red-tailed hawks could hear words on the wind. And the wind rose, and a thunderstorm broke. She tells how lightning took down an oak the way she'd take a lover. Once there were women who fed themselves on roots, who drank milk straight from the udders of wild oxen, who knew herbs and mushrooms, simples and cures. These days, if anyone thinks of these women at all, it's to dismiss them as primitive or pagan or savage. But I know how they held their bodies as they walked their just once on this earth. I know how they wept and laughed, how they loved. Once there were salmon, meadowlarks, herds of elk. Once there were groves of oaks to pray in. Once there were avenues of plane trees in the cities. Once there were words on wings. Once, when thunderstorms billowed and broke, the thick air cleared out, the air rinsed clean. Once farm, once forest, once field, once city, bridge, and tower. Once, words had roots that entered the deep earth as a lover might enter a woman. Once there were women who read books in trees.